Welcome everyone to today's episode of Spark to Spotlight. I'm your host, Carol, and joining us today is the inspiring founder and CEO of Savimbo, a company revolutionizing the way we think about carbon credits and sustainable agriculture. Thank you for being here, Drea.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Okay, let's dive right in. Could you share with us your personal journey and what inspired you to create Savimbo?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I almost answered in Spanish. That's so funny because I was traveling in Latin America and I had just finished a big project with our consulting company, and I met Johnny and Fernando, who were activists who've been there for 20 years. And something about their intelligence and their description of the problems they were facing, and they just struck me as the perfect problem that our company could easily solve for them. And then when we started working on it, we realized, wow, this isn't just one problem. This is like all the problems. This is like climate change, it's globalization, it's colonialism, it's post-colonialism, it's all these really cool stuff. And the more I work with Johnny and Fernando, the more I was impressed at how, because we had our consultants were for geniuses, so we had high IQ people from all over the world, and they really struck me as very, 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 very bright, like abnormally bright but totally untrained. So they didn't have a lot of formal education, and the concept of working with really high IQ people from two different systems was really attractive. And then when we started to build stuff with Savimbo and it took hold, I was like, okay, we actually have everything we need here to solve this problem on a major scale. And not in the idea that we're just gonna sit around and talk about it, but in the idea that we could build a tiny little machine that's very viral and can scale all over the world to solve this one problem.
So you mentioned that you originally came from Spain, right? Then you traveled to South America. That's where the story started, right?
Well, actually, I'm from Central Idaho. I grew up in the mountains. At the time I was living in Thailand, and I was a digital nomad. So I went from Thailand to South America to Dubai. And then when I got to Dubai, Dubai is it's a cool city, but it's a very inequitable desert. And after visiting Johnny and Fernando in the jungle and then going to this inequitable desert, I felt like I had traveled to an alternate future for our planet. And I said no. And I turned around and I went right back to the jungle and I said, this is the future that I want. I want this future where it's very equal, like everything is shared and collective. The living is not nearly as luxurious, but it's not a desert. It's this verdant, like fantastic funkadelic jungle. That's what I want for a planet.
I definitely can feel you since I'm living in Dubai right now. So I definitely understand what the desert means. And
Yeah.
I actually traveled to South America, like a very small part of Amazon forest as well. Yeah, definitely. We want more greenery. We want more trees, grass, those kind of environment around us. So I actually read your LinkedIn profile as well. You describe yourself as a technologist. You work with lots of scientists, right? Some of those other scientific projects you are working on, how do they actually fit into now this carbon credit markets? How do you transition from pure scientific research into this carbon credit project where you want to help the local small farmers?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so the scientific approach on carbon is very different than the public, the PR approach. Scientists in general are pretty pragmatic, and I'm a technologist, so I specialize in the intersection of emerging technology that our planet, our species have never had before, and we're suddenly using. And then hard science, which is like emerging scientific, breakthroughs, and then intractable problems. That was what our agency did. So basically taking new tools that we've never had to solve old problems like homelessness. In this case, we used to work in preventative medicine a lot. And so we saw a lot of patterns that had been solved already in medicine that were not being applied in climate. A lot of our work is just taking a solution from one discipline and applying it in another and translating it. So there's a ton of translational science that really just wasn't getting into climate at all. Climate is understaffed, on a grand scale. Humanity hasn't tried to solve this problem before. we weren't even really aware of it. Like it does kind of expand beyond our normal cognitive horizon. We normally think of ourselves in terms of nations, in terms of countries or family. We don't really think of ourselves in terms of a planet. So as a species, we're not really well equipped to even think on this scale. And it's obvious because that's how we're making messes. We don't think about the world as having lungs or a heart, but Amazon, is the lungs of the world. It literally is for the entire planet. It's an organ. And so it's an incredibly important place. It's not just like any other forest. It holds most of the world's biological DNA. Like a lot of our most recent drugs came out of there. Like carbon-wise, it stores a quarter of the land's carbon is stored in the Amazon. Like it's not just a tree anywhere else. It's an entire organism, and it supports the planet as an organ does in the human bodies. The other thing was we saw that a lot of the science from meteorology, mathematics, physics, they look at things like complex systems. So they say the human body, for instance, is a complex system. You can do a lot of work on it, but you really can't predict it. You don't know what it's going to do. Like every human body is totally unique, and you have levers and gears you can kind of push and pull on it, but at the end of the day, you don't control it. And as a doctor, you learn a profound appreciation for the lack of control you have over somebody else's health. Like you can help them, you can put them in alignment, you can give them good advice, but you cannot predict the future. You cannot promise them what's going to happen to them, and you don't control healing. That's far outside of your hands. And so I found that the same attitude of reverence and respect and awareness was not being applied in climate. We had these linear ideas. We were going to like take 1 ton of carbon here and do another ton of carbon there, and it's going to solve all the world's problems. Like these are very naive ideas. A forest like the Amazon, a planet, an ocean, you do not control it. And so we needed to approach climate science with a much higher degree of humility, respect, and then use the tools that had already been developed in medicine to work with uncontrollable systems or unpredictable systems. One of the basic rules for unpredictable systems is simplicity. You pick a good metric that approximates, and then you accept that you're never going to measure everything. And that definitely applies to forest carbon. And so a lot of forest carbon, for instance, was transacted under the hypothesis that somebody could come around who wasn't native to the forest in most cases and predict what that forest would do for 30 to 100 years into the future. If you talk to any indigenous person in that forest, they will laugh at you and kick you out of their territory because of course you don't know what that forest is going to do for 30 to 100 years. You can probably say what it did last year, maybe, if you're good at your job. Like what it actually did, not what it's supposed to do, but what it did. So the carbon science really needs to update. There's a lot of new models out there and it will update. For Savimbo, we have a great combination of people who actually live in the forest and then scientists who have access to these newer models and these more advanced models. And we get them together and then we make up better science. We sell carbon credits, water credits, biodiversity credits, and ecotourism and agrobiodiversity. Right now, our top product is biodiversity credits because we had a chance to write the first protocols and everybody loves them. And so we're using those, like, they're scaling like wild among the indigenous communities. And it's 4 times cheaper. It's 4 times more to the locals and 70% cheaper than carbon to preserve a standing forest. So we're like really proud of it. But we're going to go back and take a crack at carbon later this year. Is that a really long answer to a short question?
No, we love it. We love it. I love your elaboration and give us so much background and context around it, right? Because not everyone among our audience, including myself, is an expert on this market. So as you have mentioned, from the scientific perspective of carbon and climate issue versus the commercial side or the actually economically viable side of this ecosystem are very different. So you came from the technologist and scientific background. Then could you educate us a little bit about this carbon market, how the economics in this market work? Because not everybody would be familiar with this space. So it's like what you are buying and who you are selling to, for example. If you are getting the credits, so how the credits are produced? I guess you collaborate with the farmer, but then who are your end customer? Who would be the user of your credit, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I love this visual that I give to the small farmers because at first they were like, what is a carbon credit? And I was like, wow, you know what? Yeah, the rest of the world doesn't know either. So we started showing them this video from NASA, which monitors CO2 emissions for the planet for the last year. And it's very robustly evident that all the CO2 emissions are from the global north and all the CO2 reductions are from the global south. like in a big way, in a really, 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 really obvious way. So right now, in order to solve the planet problem, whole ball, two things. We need to stop emitting from the global north. And I don't know if anybody's ever on your show's ever been on a diet, but it's just not that easy to like not eat food, you know, because you are going to be doing some form of emitting. You're going to be using technologies that emit, but you have to use less of them, and people don't want to cut back, and there's all these kind of things. And so basically, global north definitely has to be on a very rigorous and rapid diet. Global North has not done that in any way yet. They haven't started to regulate, like really regulate. The last COPs in Dubai totally failed. Love them, but it was managed by OPEC. There was no interest in regulation. And so we're not even close to like on that diet yet, legally. Some people are voluntarily reducing with better or worse intent. Some people say they're reducing and then they try and go and buy fictional credits, which are very inexpensive. It's very inexpensive to do a fictional reduction. And that's what they call greenwashing. It's so cheap to lie about doing something. Like anybody can do it for free from anywhere in the world. And lying about doing something for a while until everybody goes like, okay, no, we're not going to do that anymore. So now you can't lie about it. So now we're into three kinds of reductions, basically. There's the reductions that you're never going to be able to make internally with what you're doing. So I'll give you a really good example. Technology-wise, aluminum manufacture is like 100% emission. And you're never going to be able to offset that. Like it's always going to be a huge emitting activity. Now, are we never going to manufacture, or should we stop manufacturing so much aluminum that we just throw in the trash? Of course. Are we never going to manufacture aluminum again? Probably not. And so there's a combination between reducing the aluminum manufacture, but then also offsetting that. Whatever you're emitting, you need to like take back out. We also have a huge backlog of work up in the atmosphere that we've been emitting for the last 200 years that we also have to go and take down. So there's things that will never stop emitting, and then stuff we have to go remove out of the atmosphere that's way too much up there. And then there's this middle ground where it's like, you probably could, and you say it's really hard and it's going to take you a long time and it's going to be expensive, but could you do it? Yes. And so you're in this kind of like mess where people don't want to, and so they're going to make it look harder than it is, but they still have to. It's just like, you know, well, I really, really need that donut, but you really, really don't need that donut. But I really eat that donut every day, but you're really going to have to stop if you don't want to die from heart disease. Like, it's the same kind of conversation. And then there's the other ones that like just stop right away, like plastic straws and all this crap. Like, just stop right now. There's no reason to keep doing it. We are specialized in bucket 3. If you look at the best support for the Amazon doesn't have a lot of people living in it. It's a huge forest that we have to keep standing. It has a lot of value being cut down. Like, people can get money out of it being cut down. So the best thing to do is tie the support of the Amazon standing, because it's, like I said, it's a planetary organ. We can't lose it, to bucket number 1, where like aluminum manufacture. And then you have like a good reason to keep it standing or to even regrow it when it's not going to go away. And that's what we're focused on. Bucket number 2, I don't really want to play, and it's not worth the hassle. People need to get their crap together. And then bucket number 1, like, just stop. Like, we do a lot of work where it's like, okay, come visit us in the Amazon, come see what it's like to live a carbon neutral lifestyle, and then ask yourself if you really need that. And most people would tell you after a week or a month where I live that it's paradise and they never want to leave. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that there is voluntary kind of reduction of their CO2 emission, but they're never going to be 100% reduction, because you need some basic stuff like transportation, you need to manufacturing stuff, you need clothing, etc. You need eating. You can never persuade them to be 100% cut down their carbon kind of emission. So there needs to be a system, right? Like a carbon credit would be a good system out there to kind of force people to face the reality and find a solution for it. I think one of the competitive advantages you mentioned in your kind of pitch deck, I have seen that before, is that you are cutting down the middleman. You are trying to tie up the small farmer from Amazon directly with the carbon credit buyer, right? Are there any other kind of competitive edge you can elaborate on top of this to say that you are kind of different from any other carbon credit offer company out there?
Yes, and it's my favorite, and it's why I do my job every day. Everybody's always talking about Indigenous inclusion. and they call me and they're like, well, so are you including Indigenous people? We are Indigenous people. Like literally my company is co-founded by 2 Indigenous founders. I have 90% Indigenous staff right now. Every Indigenous small farmer that works for us gets a piece of the company. Like the company is Indigenous, founded, led, directed, informed. The science is Indigenous science. Most of our friends and our partners are Indigenous. And that is a huge competitive advantage for 2 reasons. One is that, buyers nowadays, they get it. They get it about equity and social justice, and they want a clean product. And so we're by definition clean from the ground up, and we've got a lot of transparent mechanisms to show that. The other thing is it's better science. Like we have not done a good job of asking Indigenous people what forest science they use or how they think about forests and stuff like that. But like they have radically simplified everything that we do. They've improved our science 100-fold. The economics that we use on the ground are all like Fernanda, my partner's design, like how we pay Indigenous groups and stuff. Like the World Bank, we're building an app for the World Bank right now for an Indigenous payment system, because he like effortlessly solved this like critical problem that everybody was having with how to distribute funds in a community. And now we're co-designing. Now I'm teaching them software development, and so the guys I work with learn really, 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 really fast, and they learn in a very deconstructed way. So they don't need like 10 years in a bachelor's program to learn how to code. And so I'm just really curious to see what's going to come out of this. Like when they start doing the software interfaces and learn the process, like what they're going to make. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. This kind of co-ownership aspect with the Indigenous people themselves, and also kind of empowering with a lot of digital skills to help them with their growth. It's kind of very, very impressive. You mentioned that in your pitch deck as well, you mentioned that your traction since inception, I guess your inception is 2022, right? Since your inception was quite impressive. So could you elaborate a little bit more, like how was your traction like so far, and what was the reaction from the Indigenous community for your product?
Oh yeah. So we're a double-sided marketplace. That means you have to get supply and then sell it, right? We started with just seeing if we could get supply. We definitely have no problem getting Indigenous people or local communities or Indigenous groups to sign up to the product. The reason is, like I said, most people did not design companies for them. They designed companies for the Western world and for investors. We didn't, from ground up, from day one, everything about the company is designed to appeal to people who live in the Amazon. One of them is, an example is we do direct payments from the US. It's not very expensive for us to do a direct digital payment from a US company, but for the Amazon, it's like, they're so happy. They're like, there's no possibility of corruption. I am paid directly from the US. Like, it's a big deal. It's a big selling point. There's other things like we do transparency. We do public reporting on where the payments go and who gets it, but just minor changes like that are really big for acquisition, because they've never really had that kind of transparency in their communities before, especially around large scale projects. We also handle a lot of secrecy, so we don't talk about their maps publicly or who is enrolled or what. So for them, if they want to enroll, then it's just a private business, the company and their co-owner, but they don't have to show their neighbors or say that they're doing it. As long as they're following the rules, and we can see it from satellite. For the scale, the Indigenous communities, I would say the large part of the scale is who the founders are. Once again, like the fact that I'm the third founder, I'm not the main founder. Like Johnny and Fernanda started this project 20 years ago. That means that Johnny and Fernanda's social capital is involved in the company, and they have a reputation already in the area through 20 years of grassroots unpaid activism, where everybody knew they were getting their butts kicked. And then now they have a company and it's starting to work, and everybody, it's like the hero's journey, and everybody's really happy for them. But everybody also knows they're not just in it for the money. It's obvious for the 3 of us that we're not in it for the money, and that helps a lot when it comes to locals. They know that we're trusted and our behaviors have been trusted, and we have one of our values is trust, but we also believe that trust is earned. So we've done the time to earn the trust.
Definitely, even through my conversation with you, I can feel your passion towards this community really shining through, even across the screen. I can feel it. It's very contagious.
They are so
correct?
lovable. Yeah, I have done international development all over the world, and it's just addictive when you do a lot of international development or aid work, and then you meet a community that is just like, on fire, needs a little bit of help, and you get to watch like a little bit of help just explode into like self-sufficiency, and yeah, it's cool.
Absolutely. They are definitely in love with their land, how the land is being used. They are very careful about it. Yeah, you mentioned that Savimbo being a two-sided marketplace platform. You talk about the supply side, and then how about the demand side? So how you go out and go about getting the customers who actually going to come in and buy your credits? Do you have any like a playbook in place? How you're going to reach out to them, like your go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, so actually with the carbon credits, so carbon credits and biodiversity credits are different stages of market development. On the Gartner Hype Cycle, carbon credits are bottoming now, but they're starting to yield value. So it's not that hard to get carbon credit customers. We've already got several lined up for after we certify. For biodiversity credits, it's a frontier market, and so we're actually some of the first in the world to be getting sales. We had to really beat the grass for clients at the beginning because nobody really even knew what a client looked like. Right now, clients mostly come to us. Interviews like this help, but also we are selling on international exchanges, so we'll probably be the first certified biodiversity credit in the world, and we'll be listing on regular commodities exchanges. Our ideal is corporate customers who sign up with an API so that we can really focus on the ground problem, which is significant and requires a lot of like thinking. So if we can, the more we like industrial clients so that we can just set up a regular purchasing behaviors and not really think about it too much. And then that allows us to focus on talking to indigenous groups in their own languages and the stuff it takes to get a really cool project going on the ground in the Amazon and Congo and stuff.
So your strategy so far is to plug yourself into those exchanges, right? You are essentially a 2B business. Do you leverage any other tactics or strategies like using advertisements or influencer kind of resources to spread the words out about your solution?
Yeah, we're actually a strange business. We're this took me a while to figure out. We're B2B2C. So the people who are buying our credit, the corporates that buy our credits, they want to show their clients what they bought. And we offer a lot of tools so that clients can see, even at the per credit level, they can go in and see exactly which small farmer made the credit, the story of the small farmer, and then like the videos of the animals associated with the credit. So, and we can do that in an automated way. As a result, we actually have a strange set of clients. So we have consumer clients who just love our offering, are all over our site, follow everything we say and talk about it all the time. They help to validate the scaled sales to corporate clients. So we have small businesses that add it to luxury purchases like Europe. So if you buy a watch or a hotel room, if you rave ticket, you can add the auto owner biodiversity credit. And then on the corporate scale, they're buying in order to show that to their consumers at scale. So international banks in their sign up process, you sign up an account, you get a biodiversity credit. So what I found is that the interaction is pretty identical, whether we're talking directly to a consumer or an international bank is talking to a consumer. It's very similar language and stuff. The difference is simply scale. And it's important to us that anybody in the world can buy a biodiversity credit from us. We're not just a corporate offering or a small business or anything, but we do tend to focus on economy scale because we have a lot of forest to cover.
Right. That's a kind of an interesting path from B2B. You're actually doing B2B2C. So the end user actually becomes the consumer themselves, right? They can see from their receipts for each purchase how much goes into the biodiversity or carbon credit. They often feel good about it. I mean, they can see the concrete contribution they are making to the environment. Awesome. You said that you are the third co-founder of Savimbo. You probably not the first one when it was just founded. What was the evolving kind of the vision of Savimbo like? From the very beginning, were you already on the same vision or you have pivoted over time once you have seen some kind of challenges and hurdles, you pivoted? So this journey, share with us a little bit.
Yeah, so you can think of Savimbo as like two sides that came together. So on my side, I had a group of 400 plus consultants who work part-time, who are all high IQ, specialized in high-tech emerging science and intractable problems. So we were pro-social And we worked at the intersection for about 10 years, Silicon Valley, Dubai, around the world. And we were hired guns, but we had a real heart, and we started to save up money internally in order to have our own product. So there's us, you know, often the industrialized world dreaming of a solar punk future. And on the other side, there's Johnny and Fernando deep in the jungle fighting off the petroleum companies. So they're organizing the small farmers to keep the petroleum out of their jungle and working like with no money. At some point there was some petroleum equipment that ended up mysteriously in the river, things like that. So real jungle activists. And Johnny had been doing video cameras of camera trapping for a World Wildlife Fund, but he went off on his own, just started monitoring the wildlife, in the jungle on his own. Fernando worked with across the Amazon with a very large indigenous rights organization for about 20 years. So they're building up their skill set in their communities. Fernando's a shaman, so he starts bringing ecotourists down to the jungle, and the two of them together do guided tours for naturalists. At some point, these two groups come together on this one vacation where I meet Johnny and Fernando, and I started following Fernando around behind the scenes. So I was there as an ecotourist for ceremony, and then I just got really curious about the jungle economy, how it ran. So I'm following Fernando down the road, and I realized when he went to go run his ecotourism event that he was buying a chicken from every farmer on the road. He has 19 chickens he has to get. So he hikes his butt down the road, and he stops at 19 farms. And he's walking back with arms full of chickens. And I just really thought, this guy totally gets microeconomics in a way that very few people. It's much easier, obviously, rather than stopping in 19 farms and coming back with arms full of chickens, to just go to the nearest farm and get all your money there. But he didn't, because he knows how the jungle works. If there's money in the jungle from a foreign tourist, everybody needs to get something, so everybody's happy. And he really started, when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is the right guy to do work with. They were talking about raising money to keep a farm away from the bank. And because the bank was about to foreclose and they were afraid about losing it to somebody who would cut it down. And then we were looking at getting them funding, and they said, we want no strings attached. And I looked at the entire global market. There is no funding that was no strings attached. So I said, why don't you guys just sell the carbon credits on your land, and then it's your money, you can do whatever you want with it. And that's how the whole thing started. I was very naive at the time. I thought it would be a lot easier to get a carbon credit project off the ground than it is. But that's how we started. And then the next thing we did was we made Johnny go into town. Fernando and I from the jungle were like, Johnny, you need to go get a bank account. He's like, what? Why do I need? I need a bank account. We're like, you need it. So we made him get an email address and a bank account, and we hiked him into town. And then 3 weeks later, I'm sitting in the jungle and I sent him $5 from the US. And when it got into his account, he looks at his phone and he's like, wow, that's a business. And then we all have the same attitude, which is, you can't buy us off. We don't care about money. Fundamentally, we use it, it's a great tool, but it's not, we don't worship it, and it doesn't motivate us. And so the three of us have that in common. And we've been battle tested many times in different directions, either with a lot of money or no money, or offers to buy us out and stuff. And I can say we're fundamentally all in it for the same reason, and that's such a relief when you find that partner who gets it, has the same motivations as you do. I mean, the culture stuff just goes out the window because that's so rare.
Wow, it's amazing to see so much passion and thoughts going into this process. Wonderful. Are you right now currently living inside the jungle together with the indigenous community there?
Yeah, no, right now, technically, I'm supposed to be on vacation. We're pretending that I'm on vacation. It's good for everybody. Technically, I'm still working every day, 12 hours a day, because the company is still really young. So vacation is just a pipe dream. But I'm in Mexico on theoretical vacation, which we all know is a lie. And then normally I live in the Colombian Amazon in Villa Garzón in Putumayo.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I guess being a founder is not an easy journey, both from the business building side and your personal side. What would you say is your number one biggest challenge so far building this company? You can talk about both business side or personal living side, like living in jungle. It's up to you.
By far, this is one of the toughest companies I've ever worked on. And the reason is this population is so artificially impoverished. I did not think we were going to have to work as hard as we did to get them clients or reputation or scale, but it has been, the entire world has been very nasty from the beginning, like, oh, those guys in Colombia, like, who are they? Like, you know, and Colombia doesn't have the best international reputation, and neither does our region for a really good reason. But the state that we work in, which has some of the most biodiversity in the Amazon, and honestly, frankly, some of the coolest people I've ever worked with in my life, we're doing developing nation work, has been maintained by the government of Colombia as an illegal state for about 200 years. Before it was cocaine, it was rubber. But they've always kept it like as a cash cow that was quote unquote illegal, which the government would take a cut from, but which they could disavow. And so as a result, the borders of the state have been heavily reinforced. Like, it's very hard to get accounts started or banking going. There's like a public warning within Colombia, never do business with the state. And so as a result, like, even though for us, it's the perfect location to do a microcosm of how to fix forests, because the small farmers and the indigenous people are friends. And so it takes care of a lot of the social problems that you run into in Brazil. They still have about the same deforestation rates, but you can actually prove economic models out. And then it's really impoverished, so it's very inexpensive to kind of turn things around really fast. It's a great model location to work in, but the reputation and stuff. And as a result, it's taken us a little bit longer than it should have taken to build our reputation. It's had a double effect. Like, when we got onto the international scene, people could not believe that we had come out of the zone that we were in. They were like, it's like watching a flower grow out of concrete. They're like, that's not possible. But because of where we started from, in our DNA, baked into our DNA, like, we have all kinds of processes and ideas and solutions that other people could not come up with from outside of the zone. And so a lot of the stuff that we do is just no-brainers for us, but it works anywhere in the Amazon. And also, we started really early on with transparent processes, because we were like, we're never going to get the reputation we want. We're going to have to earn it with transparent data. And so all of our work has been very strongly data backed from the beginning. And then when the carbon credit market went through these huge upheavals with scandals and stuff, we did really well because we already had all of our stuff heavily evidenced. So what started out as a weakness has become a strength.
Yeah, I totally agree that the impoverished community, if you want to improve their living conditions, it's not like overnight effort, right? And also Colombia had this kind of reputation on the global scene that they have lots of drug trafficking kind of thing. I was there. I've been to Colombia. I've been to the Amazon side of the Amazon part of Brazil as well. I really like Colombian people and also alongside with Mexican people are some of those most hospitable people that I ever met. But because of this poor kind of reputation, Colombia kind of is struggling to attract, for example, tourists to going there compared to some other major kind of attractions, right? So yeah, building this kind of reputation among that part of the world is a big challenge. I'm so glad you are tackling on it.
Yeah, and honestly, I think people underestimate what it's done for Colombia, because that reputation as bad kids has kept Colombia relatively independent of US influence. And so unlike a lot of Latin American governments that are very much dependent on the US culture, politics, and not to their benefit in my mind, where they've been taken advantage of, Colombia as a bad kid has been kind of left alone. And so as a result, they dominate a lot of Latin American culture and thinking and independence. So, you know, art, music, writing, all comes out of Colombia. And so I think Colombia could be a really interesting site. They're solving a lot of their problems, and it could be a really interesting place for a complete cultural evolution. I see a renaissance coming for the area that's very LATAM dominated. Like, it's like global South, you know, now coming up with solutions for the world, because the global North hasn't done a good job with the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just Bogota still needs to work on its safety side, right? I stayed like
it's terrible.
I stayed 2 months in Bogota. I was like, every night was worrying about on my way home, literally.
Yeah. No, Bogota is not amazing for safety. We don't spend a lot of time in Bogota. Like I said, I live in the jungle in Putumayo, which isn't unsafe in its own way. But like, yeah, we recommend when tourists come, like, go to Cali or Medellin. Don't spend too much time in Bogota.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We saw that Savimbo also had, at least you mentioned, also has a non-profit arm, right? So could you give us a little bit background of this for-profit and non-for-profit arm, and what's their respective scope or functionality, for example?
Yeah, so Savimbo is an odd duck, and we built the company to solve the problem based on the locals' perception of it, and then we explained it afterwards. So the locals, they said a few things. First off, they didn't want a charity as their core company. They were like, we are not dependent, and they didn't like the charity models that have been running in the Amazon for about 20 years. There's a movie called Poverty Inc. that talks about like the aidism in Africa, but they didn't want that to develop, and the shaman were really adamant about that. So they wanted a for-profit company that was creating a green economy that could compete with mining, logging, narco trafficking, and that had no strings attached. That was their model. The no strings attached part was interesting. When we started working with them, we realized very early on, this company isn't going to be cannot be a pure profit company, because the transaction cost of working with small farmers is really high. So we told the investors from day one, Savimbo is a B Corp. Like, we are going to sacrifice a little bit of profit in order to do a better job. Personally, I actually think that we may not be sacrificing too much, because as a collective, like, once you figure out how to automate working with those guys, they have a lot of natural resources, and they're not that difficult to work with. They're really reliable. So it's not as expensive working with them as we thought it was going to be. Upfront, yes, running a carbon project, awful. But in the long term, as far as retention and stuff like that, they're a really reliable business partner. The nonprofit started because there was a few things that we were like, oh shoot, that's pure charity. Like, we didn't want to get the for-profit involved in it, even if the for-profit is a social enterprise. And so what we ended up doing was a blended structure. So we have a 501c3, like pure charity, and then we have the for-profit, which is converting to a B Corp. So it's a little bit less than pure profit, and the two of them work together, but we keep total separation of church and state. I'll give you an example. There's a displaced indigenous group in our area, and the shaman, when we started to work with them, a lot of them have land, which is very like big tracts of land, could be a hugely profitable project. That's a clear for-profit. But the ones that were displaced and technically should have land have no hope of getting into these projects, and so they need to get land buybacks, and so that's a pure nonprofit activity. And so we're doing a land buyback and then putting that into rights of nature. So you can still do really interesting innovation with the charitable arm. So we've got this really cool model that we're trying out, where you buy back the land through a charitable mechanism, and then the land is owned by nature itself, and then the indigenous group is the guardian of the land. And so that's a really cool thing. The charity arm, then those guys could, if they wanted, work with biodiversity credits to get funding for their now park, so they can come back and work with the for-profit, but it's totally optional and it's not related to. So that's one example of kind of like a blended project. Another one is we're working on something called recoverable grants, where indigenous groups can get an influx of money to start a green business through the charitable arm. And if the business becomes profitable, then that grant is repaid by the for-profit arm. So, but then if they don't have as much pressure to perform, so they can just go and try it, and if it works, great, and if it doesn't work, fine, it was a charitable project, and we'll try again with something else. So those are called recoverable grants, and that model of for-profit and nonprofit recoverable grants actually came out of San Francisco with an investor who works primarily with foundations and charities. And so we had independently come up with both on the different sides of the border, because he specialized in indigenous groups, and as an investor, he came up with this charity, not charity model. And then we had independently come up with the same thing on our side. And then we plugged it in together, and we were like, wow, that's crazy, but it totally works. So the big issue is that to invest in indigenous communities and to work with them, you need to have a mixed mindset of like slower growth, less demands, more experimental, and just more of kind of like, let's be good partners first. And then after that, you can oftentimes create really profitable, cool projects. But the initial project needs to be one of collaboration without any major pressure. And so, but then just giving money with no pressure whatsoever and not looking forward into what could be turned into something sustainable doesn't work either. And so it's the combination of the two that works.
Yeah, I guess you have to build that trust first, right? You have to start small and working on some smaller, simpler projects first for the local indigenous community to get to know you, to know that they can put trust behind this partnership before you go on to take on bigger projects.
Yeah, and then also just the ability to experiment. People don't realize, like, the average North American could probably take 6 months off from work and go and work on something new and make it work. the average small farmer cannot take a day off of work because they're working every day to feed the family for the next day. And so you ask them to do something unique, new, creative, they're like, I'd love to, but I can't afford to. And so you need to give, you need to pay people in order to get the chance to stop and think about it and work with you and really be creative. Otherwise, you're always just proposing something that you designed for them. So that co-creation, you have to literally buy their time to co-create. And then once you do, and the best way to do that is not through the for-profit, because then that puts a lot of pressure on them to say what you want to hear, but through the nonprofit where they feel like comfortable saying whatever they want to say. So, yeah.
Cool. Since you are juggling between so many different projects, some of them are for-profit, some of them are non-profit, then how big is your team who is handling so many projects at the same time? And also, what's your roughly split between your time and effort between those kind of different projects?
Yeah, so wow, it's not big. I don't want to tell you how small it is. It's about 15 people full-time right now, and then we have the consulting group that still helps us out. We shut down the consulting company, and we took all of our savings as a consulting company. We put it into Savimbo, and then the consultants have gone off and they're doing their own like direct consulting and they do help out Savimbo. So like the for-profit, the two companies really did get together and make a cute little Savimbo baby. And now we're just all focused on this baby. For the nonprofit arm, we have a really interesting panel of Indigenous leaders. So we have 99 Indigenous leaders, 25 countries, 55 nations. Not all of them like commerce, not all of them like carbon credits. They're very heterogeneous, but they work on, so they colonized, I shouldn't say colonized, but they basically took over the nonprofit arm and then the projects, and then they kind of do like their own targets. And so they started working on Rights of Nature campaign. So that's an example of something that has external help, but it's all like from their, it's really cool. I'll send you a link. You should include it. The Rights of Nature campaign is like, and it's super awesome because then after they did that, Savimbo looked at it and we're like, wow, so we made all of our scientific protocols Rights of Nature compliant. So we kind of have this cool duet going between the two.
Cool. Yeah, send me the link. I'm happy to take a look. So what is the role that technology is playing in this? Has the technology been able to help you improve the efficiency and productivity out of all these projects together?
Yeah, we came from a high-tech development perspective, and then we have been building software from the beginning. The difference between our software and other people's is most of the software for climate came from Global North. And because we started from the Global South and we started with very simple protocols, we did a lot of ghetto testing and mock-ups, and we did a lot of emergent coding. We discovered that most of the stuff that we needed to automate was really different. Like our interfaces are going to be very different from Global North. Our data structure is very different. Like what the data that we need to store and show our clients. I actually am really excited. Our goal is to be like Airbnb, Lyft, Uber, Airbnb. So basically there'll be a human component on the ground. It's tech optimized for payments and sales. It has kind of like a micropayment model where you're not paying for the life of the house or the life of the taxi, you're paying for like a visit. And then the homeowner or the taxi owner is then maintaining their own. And then it's automated brand-wise. So like, if you're staying in Airbnb anywhere in the world, you have a pretty reliable brand, you know pretty much what you're getting. And so Savimbo as a global brand will help validate the quality of whatever credits you get, but you'll be kind of directly connected with your taxi driver or your small farmer. So that's the software that we're starting to build now. And I'm really excited about it. I feel like this could be like the missing link, because too many of these climate projects are only for the big people, and the small people are the ones who have the bigger impact on climate. And people just couldn't figure out how to get them to do stuff together at scale.
Cool. I love that vision. Airbnb for Indigenous community in climate tech.
Yeah.
And
we're starting to build it now. We've got all the data. We know what to build. Like at the beginning, we were like, we have no idea how to even start. And then we started to mock up data sets and do small transactions. And then we started to scale and we're like, okay, now we know exactly what to build. So we started to code it literally this week. So excited.
Awesome. Awesome to hear about your excitement. Awesome. Cool. Okay, so what would be your short-term and long-term goal for Savimbo looking ahead? Do you plan for yourself some milestones, for example, in the next 6 months or 12 months?
Yeah. Oh, good. Do we? I try not to get too planny because my tendency is to plan everything out, and then in a startup that doesn't always work very well. So we use Google's OKRs. So we have like 3-month sprints, and then we have a pretty good idea for each sprint, like what the big target is. For the next 6 months, June, July, we're hoping to certify our carbon credits. So we'll be the first certified carbon credit in the world. We have another certifier starting up this month, 2 projects in the pipeline with the 2 different certifiers and 5 different international commodities exchanges. So that's a big deal. Our goal is to get that out by the end of June, July. We might be into August now. The October is COP28 COP16, and so we have a big demo day shown for investors that come in with the convertible grants and meet indigenous leaders that they invested in. So we're setting that up for a big event. And then we want to go back and circle back in the next year and launch the carbon credit option. But this would be through Cambridge called the PAC framework. And we want to use this tenure crediting idea. They hacked the problem of tenure crediting in forests. And so we want to go back and commercialize that. We also have an agroforestry protocol that we want to get into the market. So that's kind of like our next 2 years sketched out.
Wow, very exciting journey lying ahead. Pretty excited for you.
Yeah, and then I should mention we're doing the World Bank Green Tech Accelerator, and so we have a software project to deliver by October by COP16, where will be our first interface and our first payment system for indigenous groups.
COP16, is that in Azerbaijan?
It's in Cali in Colombia, so of course
for the year after, not this year.
Our entire community wants to go. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. For the year after, not this year.
No, it's this October, I believe.
Oh, okay. So I saw the COP this year is happening in Azerbaijan. No, there's another one.
That's COP28. So there's 2 COPs. One is like the biodiversity COP, and one is the carbon COP. So this is the biodiversity one.
Okay, I see. Cool. Okay, so lastly, we would like to know what advice would you give to the aspiring founders who want to build a successful business or initiative in this space that combines profitability with social and environmental responsibility?
So in this space in climate, I would say that 95% of the companies in climate are tackling an old problem with the old mindset. Like Einstein said, you can't solve a problem from the level it was created on. And too many people are trying to do the same thing that we already did that created the problem in the first place. So they're trying to come up with industrialized mechanical solutions to the problem. Or if they're doing non-industrial solutions like biota and stuff, they aren't using tech optimized for scale. They end up with just like a 50-hectare farm. Like Microsoft just did 2 big purchases of 10,000 hectares each. I'm like, that's a drop in the bucket. Like, you're not really thinking big enough. 10,000 hectares is enough maybe for a pilot, but if you're Microsoft and you're buying 10,000 hectare projects, you're not doing much. So you need to think of a combination of local action, so something that penetrates to the ground, but is also can be virally cloned and scaled, like on a big way. I find that most people miss the real world component. The other thing I would strongly advise any potential founders to do is develop your project from whatever site you think you're going to be serving. I see far too many tech companies that were built at climate conferences live in the industrialized world and make stupid decisions because they have no idea what it's actually like on the areas they're supposedly pitching or designing for. I'll give you an example. Like, so many software companies I've seen assume that there's cell coverage on the Amazon. If you'd actually been to the Amazon, you would not assume cell coverage. Like, our entire project is outside of cell coverage. There was never cell coverage, and putting cell towers in is an incredibly naive waste of money. So like, just basic stuff like that you wouldn't know unless you were living there. It's not that hard to get a Starlink and go and live wherever you're going to be building for, and then build it from there. And then you'll end up making really cool stuff, and people will be like, how did they do it? Well, they actually worked with the locals directly. The last thing I'll say is, I don't believe in this whole education barrier. We work with high IQ people for years. Talent is equally distributed. Opportunity is not. Like, you might find that your best partner does not have your education or your reputation or even speak your language. And so really keep a eyes wide open for talent outside of the line. Like, just don't think that you're going to get the best person from Harvard Business School, because you actually might not. You might get the best business person as a straight kid or a post-incarcerated person. Having a wider filter, and those are actually some of our high IQ people that came into our network. So because we didn't look for social characteristics when we judge people, we judge them based on their ethics, their behavior, and their talent. You can really end up with a really diverse, cool workforce.
Wonderful, awesome stories. Thank you so much, Drea, for sharing your stories and experiences with us today. It's been so inspiring to learn about Savimbo and your impactful work.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And we hope you are living as inspired as we are. See you in the next episode.